Today, I'm going to list the top moments of Legacy of Vader Issue 3 and the top Reylo moments of the Rise of Skywalker adaptation, also Issue 3. So hey everyone, just to introduce myself, I'm Maury Mole, and I cover the emotional heart of Star Wars. And this video is part of a series covering the Ben Solo and Kylo Ren moments of Legacy of Vader with some bonus stuff from the long-awaited Rise of Skywalker adaptation. So let's get into Legacy of Vader Issue 3. So we're back on Tatooine like last time, and my first observation is that Gardulla doesn't know Kylo Ren. Either his name isn't that widespread yet, or she's largely cut herself off from society. If it's the former, I'm quite intrigued at this, as it means even Snoke didn't promote Kylo that much. Also, I want to say that Kylo reminds me here of that little bat meme, like, "Don't touch me, I am the knight." But secondly, the first thing Kylo thinks of when the torture begins is Rey. When he said, "You're no one," he meant this to emphasize that she's free of the burden of legacy, and that Rey has the power to become whoever she wants to be, free of expectations. Something which Kylo Ren envies. However, when Gardulla says it, she means it derisively. So, number 3, this quote here, "There is no pain, only power." So this is interesting. It really isn't a Sith quote or anything else that I can find. It's like he's trying to say there is no pain, that he's not feeling it, but I mean, he's definitely feeling it, that. And you'll notice the panels get smaller and smaller, indicating how small he feels. And at his weakest, he thinks someone will come looking for him. And it's a vulnerable moment, and I like how this page displays that. And in number 4, Gardulla has clearly made a deal with someone, likely Vanee, to control Kylo Ren in exchange for weapons. And put a pin in that because I'll get back to Vanee in a bit. So, number 5, the gas that they pump into his room makes Kylo Ren dream of Vader. And this whole scene is kind of like the one in Rogue One. And Kylo at first seems frightened of him and surprised. Of course, he's never actually seen Vader, but that fear quickly becomes awe, and then he imperiously commands his grandfather to speak with him. And I like that, actually. So we come to number 6, which is part of the same group of panels. I noticed that Kylo Ren goes from seeing himself in the Han Solo clothes in his mind, which is interesting as this is more of his own mental image of himself than his Supreme Leader outfit, to an image of himself as weak and in chains, and is suddenly reminded of his own vulnerability. And in those little panels, this little story arc here, Vader simply says that all that made him magnificent, he did alone. Of course, this is all Kylo's dream. It's not the same as talking to Vader, who would be Anakin as a Force ghost now, and he wouldn't say anything like this now. Now, Kylo Ren fears solitude. He's very lonely, and he wanted to be with Rey, and I think he still does. But right now, he doesn't think he can have that bond with Rey, and he has to use his loneliness here to his advantage, as his loneliness is his pain. But there is a useful message in what Dream Vader says. He does realize that he cannot rely on others to save him, at least not the Finalizer or Hux. So he commands Gardulla to say it. In other words, what she said earlier, obey. So that way he gets a dramatically answer no, and finally declares he will not obey, which comes to my number 7 point, is that he blows up this little stone torture room like in the Rise of Kylo Ren, where the temple blows up. No lightning, but it's kind of reminiscent of that. So now that he's free, he somehow kills a giant monster out in the desert and makes what I think are claw weapons, and then kills 2 people and uses their radio to bring down the Finalizer to Tatooine. I do want to point out here that based on the color of the sky, it seems like it takes him several hours to make his way from the noonday suns in the blue sky to Gardula's castle in the evening on Dewback. Why Gardula keeps her torture chamber separate from her palace, I don't know, but we see that there's people standing outside of it. So now that he's reached the palace, he calls on Hux to attack with these coordinates that he specifies to him, and to attack in 20 minutes. A lieutenant warns Hux that this is Kylo's location. Hux tells her not to question the Supreme Leader, and I think Hux is secretly hoping he gets to kill Kylo. But in under 20 minutes, Kylo has killed off all the guards and gone within the palace to, I presume, kill whoever was within the castle, including Gardula. He's also lost that poncho he got earlier from that monster. But my number 8 point is he's come out of this situation very, very confident. And so the orbital bombardment begins on time and the palace is gone. Kylo merely says no, his final word of defiance towards Gardula. So he's come out of this victorious. And so now we are back to Vanee and Kylo at the end of this comic. And Kylo's back to being dressed in his typical Supreme Leader clothes. And that takes me to our number 9 point, where once again, Kylo waits just a beat before answering Vanee with saying that he learned he was alone. That was his message from Vader, that he's alone. And that pause and that little beat with that silent panel makes me think more and more that he is saying what he thinks Vanee wants to hear, whether there's any truth to it or not. And it tells me Kylo Ren does not trust Vanee, which is good because Vanee is somehow already on Naboo, and I don't know how he's getting around this fast, but he is. So Vanee left Tatooine somehow and is on Naboo waiting for Kylo. And I want to point out that in the Free Comic Day story, Vanee is featured in it. Anyways, in that comic, he learns about Kylo's existence from the HoloNet. So when we see Vanee in the first issue of Legacy of Vader, he already knew about Kylo. And that leads me to think he is absolutely manipulating Kylo. And I think he just wants to turn Kylo into a second Vader for him to worship and idolize. And I think Kylo knows this already, and it's definitely leading him to be wary of Vanee, but he still wants to learn about Vader from him, and I think he just wants to see how it all plays out. Okay, and now moving right along to The Rise of Skywalker, issue 3, here's some of the top Reylo moments that we got. So this comic goes in for more of that dyad paneling, which I love, where we have Kylo and Rey on opposite sides. Rey saying, "Don't," makes this look like a couple's argument. I thought this was kind of a funny panel, probably unintentionally. And not Reylo related, but I actually like this picture of angry Rey and grandfather Palpatine. I just like it. And then finally, we see them standing only feet away as we get Kylo's exposition on their family history. And I do like this image with Leia and Dathan in it. I just like it. So it's never lost on me that he holds out his hand to Rey and she says, "I do," before running away. And then this is a really fun panel here. In this panel, Palpatine remarks that the Jedi apprentice lives, meaning Rey. This now kind of reads to me as a little bit sarcastic, especially with the book Secrets of the Sith, which provides context that Palpatine never expected Kylo to go through with killing her. All the same, he still threatens to kill Kylo. And it's funny because to the delight of Kylo, he perceives that Palpatine fears Rey. And he is just so happy about this. Look at the way he walks off. He's happy. This is the best thing to him. Also, not Reylo related, but I was happy to see Janna in her Stormtrooper uniform for the first time. And also, side note, we're finally getting a book later this year about Finn and Janna after the Rise of Skywalker that explores their lives as stormtroopers, and that's a book that we definitely needed. I'm happy to see that coming up. But anyway, back to Rey and Kylo Ren. We get Rey on the fallen Death Star, where there are visions of the past, Luke and Palpatine. And finally, yes, Stark Ray, also this amazing diode line. He knows. He knows what I saw. Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, he knows her so well, and then Rey knows that he knows her, and it frightens and angers her. And I think this is just some great drama here. Then finally, the fight amongst the heart-shaped waves. So, to be continued. And that's it for this month. If you have any other fun observations about recent Star Wars comics, let me know, and may the Force be with you.